I withdrew from being my sister's surrogate after overhearing her and her husband planning to cut me out of the baby's life once it's born. Now she's telling everyone I stole her only chance at motherhood. I, 32F, was going to be a surrogate for my sister Sarah, 35F, and her husband Mike, 37M. Some background: Sarah and I grew up incredibly close despite our 3-year age gap. We shared clothes, secrets, and dreams. From when we were little girls playing with dolls, Sarah always talked about being a mother. She would name her future children, plan their birthdays, and even kept a journal of all the things she wanted to teach them. When she was diagnosed with severe endometriosis at 25, it was devastating, but we all thought modern medicine would help. Unfortunately, complications led to an emergency hysterectomy when she was 28, and it broke something in her. I remember sitting with her in the hospital after her surgery, holding her hand while she sobbed uncontrollably. She kept saying her life was over, that no one would ever want to marry her now. Our parents were beside themselves, watching their typically strong, ambitious daughter fall into a deep depression. Sarah had always been the achiever, straight A's, competitive swimming, class president, successful career in marketing. But this knocked her sideways in a way nothing else ever had. For 2 years, she withdrew from life. Stopped going to family events, called in sick to work so often she almost lost her job, and pushed away most of her friends. I was one of the few people she would still talk to, and I spent countless nights on the phone with her, trying to keep her spirit alive. Then she met Mike through a work conference 5 years ago. He was recently divorced, no kids, and, according to Sarah, understood her pain because his ex-wife had left him when they couldn't conceive. They connected instantly over their shared dream of having a family. Within 6 months, they were engaged, and Sarah seemed to come back to life. She started talking about alternative ways to have children, researching adoption and surrogacy options. The adoption process turned out to be more complicated than they expected. Several agencies were hesitant because of Sarah's history of depression, and one potential match fell through at the last minute when the birth mother changed her mind. Sarah was crushed, but she refused to give up on having a baby that was biologically related to at least one of them. That's when they started seriously looking into surrogacy. The costs were astronomical, nearly $150,000 through an agency. Sarah and Mike had some savings, but between their wedding, buying a house, and the failed adoption attempts, they were struggling to make it work. They looked into loans, but the interest rates were predatory. I should mention that during this time, I had my own struggles with fertility. I have PCOS and had 2 early miscarriages before having my daughter Emma, now 4. Sarah was incredibly supportive during my pregnancy, even though I know it hurt her to watch me experience what she couldn't. She threw my baby shower, came to every appointment I invited her to, and was in the delivery room with me. When Emma was born, Sarah was the most devoted aunt imaginable. The idea of being their surrogate had been percolating in my mind for a while. I'd seen how amazing Sarah was with Emma, how natural she was as an aunt. During a family dinner about 8 months ago, after a few glasses of wine and watching Sarah lovingly play with Emma, I made the offer. The look on her face, I'll never forget it. Pure joy mixed with disbelief. She burst into tears and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Mike kept saying I was an angel, that they would never be able to repay me. Our parents were crying too, especially Mom, who kept saying how proud she was of her girls. We spent the next few months going through all the necessary steps. Medical evaluations confirmed I was a good candidate, and the psychological screenings went well. We had 2 counseling sessions, though looking back, they were pretty superficial, mostly focused on the medical aspects and general emotional preparation. We never really got into the nitty-gritty of what our relationship would look like after the birth. I had some concerns about Mike during this process. Little things that nagged at me but that I brushed off because I was so focused on helping Sarah. He would make comments about how the baby needed to bond properly with Sarah from the start, and how too many people involved could confuse a child. Once, he asked if I would be willing to pump breast milk but have it delivered through a third party so there wouldn't be unnecessary contact during the newborn period. I thought he was just being overprotective of Sarah's role as mother, and honestly, I understood that to some extent. We had signed some preliminary paperwork but hadn't done the final contracts yet. The fertility clinic wanted us to have all legal documents in order before proceeding with any medical procedures. Sarah was getting impatient, constantly texting me about scheduling appointments and asking if I'd started the prenatal vitamins they'd bought me. Then came the night that changed everything. I was at their house on a Tuesday evening, waiting in the guest room while they finished up a video call with Mike's parents about their upcoming visit. Their home office is right next to the guest room, and the walls are pretty thin, something they've complained about before regarding their noisy neighbors. I was playing a game on my phone when I heard their call end, followed by Sarah's excited voice, "Mike, can you believe it? In less than a year, we'll have our baby. Mom and Dad are so excited to be grandparents again." Mike's response was warm at first, but then the conversation took a turn that made my heart stop. Sarah said, "We need to talk about after the birth though. I've been thinking about what you said, and you're right. We need to make sure we establish clear boundaries with my sister. I don't want her thinking she has any special rights or connection to our child." Mike's voice got serious. "Exactly. And I think we should seriously consider that job offer in city 4 hours away. We can have a fresh start without her trying to insert herself into every milestone. The last thing we need is her confusing our kid about who their real mother is." Sarah replied, "I've been thinking the same thing. I know it sounds harsh, but I can't risk her trying to take my place. We'll just tell everyone we used an anonymous surrogate and gradually distance ourselves. She'll understand eventually. Plus, this way Emma won't be asking awkward questions about why her mom gave away her brother or sister." Mike added, "And we should probably block her on social media right after the birth, so she doesn't see any baby pictures and get emotional. We can tell your parents to be careful about what they share too." I sat there, frozen, as tears rolled down my face. My hand was shaking so badly I dropped my phone, making a small thud on the carpet. They must have heard because they stopped talking briefly, but then continued in lower voices that I couldn't make out clearly. I left their house that night making an excuse about Emma not feeling well. Sarah hugged me goodbye, telling me how excited she was for our next appointment at the fertility clinic. The guilt in her eyes was non-existent. This was a woman who had completely rationalized deceiving her own sister. The next day, I contacted both the fertility clinic and my lawyer to withdraw from the surrogacy arrangement. My lawyer advised me to get everything in writing and to save any communication from Sarah and Mike. I didn't tell them immediately because I needed time to process everything and ensure I was legally protected. They found out a week later when the fertility clinic called them about the cancellation. Sarah showed up at my house while I was getting Emma ready for preschool. She was hysterical, screaming on my front porch that I was destroying her only chance at motherhood. Mike was with her, calling me manipulative and accusing me of leading them on for attention. Several neighbors came out to see what the commotion was about. When I tried to explain that I had overheard their conversation, they switched tactics immediately. Sarah claimed they were just discussing normal boundaries that any parents would want. Mike said I had no right to eavesdrop on a private conversation in their home. Sarah threw in that she had supported me through my pregnancy with Emma, and this was how I repaid her. The worst part was when Emma came downstairs and saw her beloved aunt screaming at me. She started crying, and Sarah tried to go to her, saying, "See what mommy's doing? She's being mean to Aunt Sarah." That's when I lost it and told them to get out before I called the police. The situation has completely divided our family. Sarah has been telling everyone that I stole her only chance at motherhood and that I led her on just to crush her dreams at the last minute. She's been posting cryptic but obviously targeted social media updates about toxic family members and having your dreams stolen by someone you trusted. Her friends have been commenting with supportive messages, calling me, without naming me, things like narcissist, attention seeker, and baby dangler. Some family members are firmly on my side. My Aunt Lisa, who went through a similar situation years ago with a friend, told me I absolutely did the right thing. She said that anyone who would plan to deceive you before you even help them is showing their true colors. My cousin Rachel, who's a family therapist, said that Sarah and Mike's behavior shows serious red flags about their emotional readiness for parenthood. Others think I'm being selfish and dramatic. My Uncle Bob suggested I was just jealous of the attention Sarah was getting. My mom's best friend, who's known us since we were kids, said I should have at least tried to discuss my concerns with them instead of just pulling out. My parents are devastated and stuck in the middle. Mom calls me crying almost daily, begging me to reconsider, saying that Sarah has waited so long for this chance and that siblings should be able to work things out. Dad is quieter about it, but he pulled me aside at a family dinner last week and asked if there was any way to salvage the situation. The pain in his eyes was unbearable. Then Mike's sister Claire reached out to me privately. She shared something disturbing. Apparently, this wasn't the first time Sarah and Mike had planned to cut someone out of their lives after getting what they wanted. They had done something similar to Mike's best friend's wife, Jennifer, who had helped plan and execute their entire wedding for free. She's a professional wedding planner. After the wedding, Sarah began complaining that Jennifer was too close to Mike and suggesting she had ulterior motives. They gradually cut contact with both Jennifer and Mike's best friend, even though the men had been friends since college. Claire also mentioned that Sarah had made several comments at family gatherings about how she would do anything to have a baby, including some ethically questionable suggestions about international adoption that had made Claire uncomfortable. She warned me that Sarah and Mike had recently been researching surrogacy in countries with fewer regulations, something that worried her given their pattern of behavior. The whole situation has made me question every interaction I've had with Sarah over the past few years. Looking back, there were signs I ignored. The way she would get oddly competitive about Emma's affection, making comments about being the favorite aunt and getting upset if Emma preferred to sit with our other sister-in-law at family gatherings. How she would sometimes make passive-aggressive remarks about how some people get to have babies easily while others suffer. The time she got angry when I mentioned possibly having a second child, saying it wasn't fair for me to stockpile blessings. My therapist has been incredibly helpful through all this, helping me process both my guilt and my grief. She pointed out that their planned deception would have ultimately hurt not just me, but also the child, who would have grown up with lies about their origin story. She also helped me see that my responsibility to protect my own emotional well-being and that of my daughter outweighed any obligation to fulfill this promise to Sarah. The past month has been a roller coaster. Sarah and Mike have apparently told their side of the story to everyone who will listen. I've received countless messages from mutual friends and distant relatives, some supportive but many condemning me for playing games with Sarah's emotions. One of Sarah's college friends even wrote a vague Facebook post about women who weaponize their fertility, which was shared hundreds of times. What really keeps me up at night is thinking about the baby that will never be. Despite everything, I know Sarah would have loved that child fiercely. But love isn't always enough, and I couldn't bear the thought of helping to create a life that would be founded on lies and manipulation. Emma asks about her Aunt Sarah sometimes, wondering why she doesn't come over to play anymore. I've tried to explain it in age-appropriate ways, but how do you tell a 4-year-old that adults sometimes hurt each other in complicated ways? My lawyer advised me to keep all documentation of their social media posts and messages in case this escalates further. She's concerned about potential defamation, given how public Sarah has made the situation. The preliminary paperwork we signed was just for medical screenings and evaluations, so legally, I was well within my rights to withdraw. They never offered to pay me anything substantial, just medical expenses. This was supposed to be my gift of love to them. The hardest part is knowing that this has permanently altered our family dynamics. Holidays will never be the same. Our parents are talking about having separate celebrations this year to avoid conflict. Other family members are already taking sides about which gathering they'll attend. I've started seeing a separate grief counselor to help me process the loss of my relationship with my sister. Some days I'm angry, others I'm just profoundly sad. Sarah was my best friend for so many years, and now she won't even be in the same room as me. Part of me wonders if I should have just gone through with it, knowing their plans, just to give her the baby she desperately wants. But then I think about the years of lies that would follow, the pain of watching my niece or nephew grow up believing I was a stranger, the difficulty of maintaining that deception in our small community. Update: 1 week later, things have gotten even more complicated. Sarah's friend reached out to tell me that Sarah and Mike are now seriously looking into international surrogacy options that sound sketchy and potentially exploitative. They're considering working with an agency in a country where surrogacy contracts are barely regulated. I've tried to warn my parents about this, but they're so desperate to see Sarah happy that they're considering helping to fund it. I feel like I've opened a whole new can of worms. My therapist reminded me that I'm not responsible for Sarah's choices or their consequences. She pointed out that their willingness to pursue ethically questionable options suggests that my intuition about their character was correct. For now, I'm focusing on healing and maintaining relationships with the family members who have shown me support. Sarah and I haven't spoken in weeks, and honestly, I'm not sure our relationship will ever recover. But I'm at peace knowing I made the right decision for myself and, ultimately, for any child that would have been involved in this situation. Final thoughts: trust your gut, get everything in writing, and remember that no one is entitled to the use of your body, no matter how much you love them or how much they want something. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the right ones. Edit 1. Thank you for all the responses and support. To address some common questions. 1. Yes, I have saved recordings of their social media posts and messages in case this escalates further. 2. The preliminary paperwork we signed was just for medical screenings and evaluations. My lawyer confirmed I was well within my rights to withdraw. 3. No, they didn't offer to pay me anything substantial, just medical expenses. This was going to be a gift of love from me to them. 4. Several people have asked about Sarah's previous behavior patterns. Looking back, she has always been somewhat possessive and competitive with me, but I always brushed it off as sister stuff. Edit 2. Some people have mentioned surrogacy counseling. We did have 2 sessions, but they were focused mainly on medical aspects and general emotional preparation. We hadn't gotten to the detailed discussions about boundaries and future relationships yet. Edit 3. A lot of people are asking about Mike's ex-wife. I've learned through family that their fertility issues weren't the only reason for their divorce. Apparently, there were issues with him being controlling about who she could be friends with and how she spent her time. This adds another concerning layer to the whole situation. Update 2. Sarah's friend just informed me that they've started a GoFundMe for international surrogacy, using a heavily edited version of events that paints me as the villain. My lawyer is looking into whether this constitutes defamation. Final update. It's been 6 months since my last update, and a lot has happened. I wasn't planning to post again, but after receiving so many supportive messages asking how things turned out, I felt I owed you all some closure. First, the GoFundMe situation imploded spectacularly. After multiple people reported it for misleading information, they were forced to take it down. Several family members who had initially sided with Sarah changed their minds after seeing how she had twisted the story for financial gain. The final straw for many was when she claimed I had promised to be their surrogate for years and backed out after they'd already paid thousands in medical expenses, both completely false. The biggest development: Mike's ex-wife reached out to me after seeing Sarah's social media posts. Turns out their fertility issues were fabricated. His ex never had trouble conceiving. She had chosen not to have children because of Mike's controlling behavior. She shared documentation from their divorce proceedings that showed a pattern of emotional manipulation very similar to what I witnessed. When I shared this information with my parents, it finally opened their eyes to the situation. Sarah and Mike did pursue international surrogacy, but it fell through when the agency they were working with was shut down for ethical violations. My parents thankfully never gave them the money they were considering. The family has been through intensive therapy, both individual and group sessions. During one particularly emotional session, Sarah finally broke down and admitted that she and Mike had planned to move away all along. She also revealed that Mike had been the one pushing for complete separation, convincing her it was necessary for their fresh start. As for me, I'm doing much better. My therapist helped me work through the guilt and grief, and I've actually started dating again after my divorce 3 years ago, something I hadn't mentioned in previous posts because it wasn't relevant to the surrogacy situation. The most surprising outcome? I've become involved with a surrogacy support group and I'm helping to advocate for more comprehensive psychological screening and counseling requirements for all parties involved in surrogacy arrangements. Several lawmakers in our state have shown interest in our proposed legislation. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead us exactly where we need to be. Thank you, Reddit, for helping me stay strong when I doubted myself the most.